Hello, welcome. Hey, Jen.
Hi.
We are glad to be with you for our Monday HR Huddle, December 14th. We are trekking right along in this month and fast approaching year end. So we thought we would talk about some year-end things that you guys might be working on in HR, like budgeting and pay raises, uh, maybe getting ready for some mid-year reviews, although many of you have already done that, but I think there's some, adjustments or things that you might be making, other, planning that you're doing. So we thought we would talk about a little bit of those ideas today, and I'm sure other things will sneak in. So I know one of the things that we've been seeing HR leaders that we know working on is they're planning for 2021 and how to budget and budgeting in this blended environment, which we think is going to continue to be required. And many firms we know are saying all remote through spring, at least, maybe June, but for sure some kind of blended environment in 2021. And I think some firms even are planning remote learning, as to continue in 2021 and maybe even exclusively for a while anyway. So I think, trying to figure that out. And I think one of the things that I would start with on that, since I'm talking about learning, is what are we doing for soft skills training or leadership development? I think that kind of got put on hold as we were all trying to figure things out this year, and timing and moving things to remote. And we would say that's something to look at putting back in. I was on with an HR director today, and she was talking about trying to figure out that schedule and where to put those back in, because they were missing in some places, and maybe in its entirety for some firms, but it was missing definitely in some places. So I think that's something very much to pay attention to, how to weave that in this environment that we have. So to make sure we're budgeting for it and allocating for it. Jen, I don't know if there's anything on that particular or anything from a planning or budgeting perspective, that you want to add.
Well, I think more on the learning side,
Yeah.
Tamara, just a little expansion. I mean, we certainly saw in the first half of 2020, firms say, we'd rather do leadership and management training in person.
Yeah.
And so we'll wait till the second half when we'll all be able to get back together again, which, as it turns out, wasn't going to be happening. So what ended up, I just think from our experience as a learning and development provider, we saw then this kind of mad scramble in the last 4 months where firms were like, holy mackerel, we're not going to get any in. Let's just put together some stuff. And it felt the tiniest bit rushed and, just sort of not thoroughly planned and thought through. And we've been scrambling to try to meet that demand of that sort of last minute, let's get something in or start something, maybe, let's just get something going. So as you look at 2021 as a planner and budgeter, our suggestion is that we look at it the opposite way that we looked at 2020, where we thought, well, the first half will be, remote and the second half will be in person. And that we just take it like we know we're going to be remote and we're going to plan a remote calendar. And then if we can shift some of our remote activities to in person, if we can afford to do that, then we will. And, and you might think, well, that's the convergence ladies saying that because they are being self-serving or, it's to their benefit to get their stuff booked. That's not why we're saying it. We're saying it because we think your people need to see that you are continuing to make these investments. They want to know, like, if your firm has always done a certain program and you put it on hold for a while, it probably won't be that good for overall morale and potential engagement, motivation, retention if we just keep kicking the can till we can do it in person again. So having something that they can look forward to that's going to enhance their skills beyond just the technical. And some firms have put a lot of their technical on hold too. Right. Obviously, you've gotten enough to meet your CPE requirements, I'm assuming. But I think that just mapping out the plan with the circumstances we have, and then as the vaccine takes hold, as things reopen, as we can start to think about in person, then you can evaluate how wise it is to spend the money on travel or, that sort of thing. And I do think, and we've said this 1,000 times, Tamara and I, that we're going to do way more blended. We're going to do way more remote and in person with, back to in person when we can. But there's some places where we were spending money that wasn't the best, most efficient use. And some firms, especially multi-office firms, have realized an incredible savings from carting their people around from office to office, and and kind of wear and tear on their people too. And we would encourage you to budget in 2021 plans to make some of your programs permanently remote, and really try to find that right balance of which ones will be delivered remotely, and because we don't need that much camaraderie and bonding and happy hours and meals together, and then which ones are really important for bonding, and we're going to deliver those in person. So anyway, those are just some thoughts I would have as you're contemplating your next year.
Well, and I think it's important, like you said, to, I can plan options for some of them and figuring out which those are, and then budgeting, because there is more travel, or there might be more technology investments we need to make, or, looking at it from that perspective. So I think that's important to have kind of some options built in there too.
Yeah.
So I also think, this is the time of year we're looking at pay increases and raises. And I know, I think we halted most of that at the beginning of the year, or come March anyway. And, firms are trying to figure out, gosh, where are we ending up? And, many firms are ending up okay or up. There's some down depending on their client markets and demographics, but, a lot of them, they're finding they're okay. Or even up because of the additional advisory services. And so they're reinstituting maybe some pay cuts that happened.
Reversing some pay cuts.
Reversing some pay cuts, yes. And then looking at what should we be doing for pay raises this year. And then again, budgeting and planning what should we be scoping for 2021 for bonuses. So I think that's another place to, be looking at, and what should we be doing. And we're seeing, I think firms still do kind of a standard increase this year. I think most firms that we're talking to are doing some kind of increase, for pay raises this year. And Jen, I don't know, you were going to look up the statistic. Did you find that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's, it's very conservative, Tamara.
Yeah.
So like a Robert Half or whatever, the statistics out there are showing that for new hires, there's almost no movement in the base pay. So, and they're talking about, usually they look at what is the market inflation for new hires. Everybody else has to go up at least that much, because you can't have new hires crowding in your existing people. So if it's going up by 1% or 0.5% or something, it's pretty minuscule. Then that's leaving firms with kind of a conservative approach to base salary increases. And, we're hearing firms still shooting to average 3 to 4%, let's say, with their really wonderful, highest potential, most important people sitting in that 6 to 8 range, let's say. And then those, people that aren't doing well, maybe not getting a raise or getting a very small raise. So I still think we're seeing that range. I've been talking to a lot of firms that they may have frozen salaries. So they didn't do any pay cuts, but they didn't do any increases. And their typical increase period might have been July 1 after a fiscal year end June 30. And right now they're kind of evaluating at their half year point, right, that the performance was solid and is continuing to be strong. And so they're instituting the pay raises that would have been in June and providing back pay. So, that's some firms. Not everybody is in a position to do that, but we are hearing about that as well. Which those folks appreciate, because it was scary to have, hearing about layoffs and pay cuts and all of that. And so getting their back pay or reinstituted raises is a positive. But I wish I could tell you that there was one approach, like here's what everybody's doing. There wasn't one approach to how they approached the pandemic.
Right.
We had people that did, significant layoffs and froze pay and didn't pay bonuses. And then as they started to warm up and feel a little bit more confident, they paid the bonuses owed from the prior year. Right. But they might have still kept, base pay stable. And, so I feel like it's all over the place. But for your firm, what you have to do is, another thing to factor in is how are you doing in terms of competing at market? If you were already below market or chasing the market, you should be taking this opportunity to try to catch up to the market a little bit. And don't sort of, if you're making good money, profits are solid, don't, cheap out or wimp out. And say, well, 1%, that sounds good. We'll do an average of 2% or something. Just think about that related to your firm and competing at or above market, because it's a tight labor market. I mean, capacity is tight. We are not encountering any firms where they're saying to us, wow, we have an excess of people and we're wondering where the work's going to come from. We're hearing, oh my gosh, do you have anybody that could recruit somebody for me before January? Some buddies before January. We're referring a lot of people to fractional and temporary labor folks and talking about non-traditional staffing to get them through this spring busy season. So this isn't the time for us to make our people feel that we're getting a little scroogey. Now, if our firm's performance is down, we want to be transparent about that. If we are, not able to invest in raises in an effort to stabilize the base and keep our people and our team whole, those are messages you have to give. So we're not trying to make you, give while you're already bleeding. But for those firms that really benefited with the lack of travel, they benefited from, PPP and the number of wonderful advisory opportunities we've had with clients. They benefited from the increase in tax planning, just the general conditions have been favorable from an expense perspective, and they might be more profitable. Let's make sure that our people feel our appreciation. And I've been really proud of firms talking about what they're doing here at year end to try to help people feel a little joyous as they leave for the holidays. So I'm sure you guys are all out there making those plans, but I'd just be a little nervous if we were trying to be too conservative right now on the raises.
Well, and I think it also sends a message of being hopeful as we're entering 2021. And so I think that's important to consider too, along your transparency idea. What are we anticipating? Where are we up? What new services have we implemented that we're going to continue? How else are our clients going to be able to use us? I mean, there's so many positive messages as we close out the year. I mean, it's been a hard year, and there's a whole bunch of cons also. Not to mention the pandemic and the illness and the deaths, but just from a business perspective. So I think that's really important to tie that to the message, and just again, just share and ask them. I would ask them too, by the way. So I think,
Tamara, I have one more thought about this, about the raise idea. And that is that for the clients that we've talked to that are doing, like they're instituting the raises that were deferred, and then they are paying back pay. There's this additional money popping onto the check. And I talked to a managing partner today, and I was really, proud of her because she was talking about how she was managing the message with all her partners. And, she said, it's not a bonus. Some of them are going to say, you're getting a bonus on your check. And she's like, that's not a bonus. That's their pay raise retroactive to the pay raise date. And it's their back pay, if you will, that we had to defer until we were sure what the conditions of our firm would be like inside this pandemic. And she said, so I've been really careful to craft the message, not to oversell it or to make it sound like it's something else than what it is, and to acknowledge that we asked them to defer and thanking them for that deferral and them, being a partner with us during that uncertainty, but to make sure that it's messaged right. So it made me think of whatever you're going to do, manage the message, because we have a saying at Convergence, manage the message or the message will manage you. And by managing it, it's figure out why are we doing it? What are we doing and why? And then how does it need to be positioned? And then getting that positioning in writing to your leaders and making sure they're all on the same page so that they stick with the message when they're talking about it to others, so that you're consistent and we don't start throwing around words like bonus and all that when it's not a bonus, or if it is a bonus, that we're not making it sound like it's not. So anyway, just a few
Well,
thoughts.
that's so great because, Jen, I think that also builds trust, to the idea that, gosh, we had a hard decision to make earlier this year. And we said, we'll see where we end up at the end of the year. And now this is where we're ending up. And thank you for, partnering with us. Thank you for, rolling up your sleeves and linking arms and doing everything we did. And it would grow some cynicism if it said bonus and we did pay cuts. It's like, wait a minute, you took that away from me. So we do have to manage that. We were talking about just how that wording gets on the paycheck. I mean, it's, little things, the big message to the partners, and how are we messaging it to those little words that show up on the paycheck. And sometimes we don't have flexibility with that, but gosh, that's so important. And we don't think of some of those details. So
great point.
Well, and so I think the other thing to think about is where are we digitizing? Our HR processes, continuing to digitize our HR processes in 2021. And, it could be from recruiting to our performance review processes, do it yourself, payroll, maintenance, all of those kinds of things. What are we doing? Learning, we talked about L&D and moving that to remote. What else do we need to move to remote or a blended environment so we have access no matter where we are? But that has to be thought through and planned and prioritized and then budgeted for. I'm sure we're continuing to have to make investments in that. And we're looking at that across the firm, but HR definitely has pieces of it to consider and look at and say, where do we need to digitize, or continue to digitize in 2021. So that's a place I would highlight, I think.
I agree. And if your firm doesn't have an HRIS of some kind, that's probably the mother of all, digitizing hubs to start with or whatever, but not all firms can afford that or get buy-in for that initially. And so, where's the paper and where are the manual processes? That's a place to look really quickly.
Right.
For even like forms in HR, we'd love them to be forms through an HRIS or a platform specific to that form. But if you can't, you can use forms like Jot form or, other simple, low cost, fillable PDFs.
Right.
Whatever we have to do to get off paper and to make sure that we're staying off paper, that we don't go back to any paper processes if we can help it. And some of you might be working blended and you're in person for a part of the time and your people are cycling through now, and you could get tempted to say, well, I could put this in everyone's box or whatever the paper is these days.
No.
Yeah. And the answer is no.
We'll mail it. We got mailed all the benefits from my husband's company last month. And I was like, what? So it's amazing. And it's a big company. So it's like, how do we digitize this? And I think your young people, your next gen are going to pay attention to that. I was talking to somebody about recruiting and campus recruiting, and oh my gosh, that has shifted completely. And what are you doing to be able to support what the campuses, the universities are doing, and how your next gen staff are going to be interacting with you? And they're going to expect it to be online. They're going to expect there to be a portal. They're going to be expected, to be, don't mail me anything. And do not use the word fax. That's, a bad word. But, so.
Well, they would accept shipping of like premiums or something. So they'll accept shipping of a cool, golf shirt or, for first year hires, new business cards.
Or paper. I guess I was meaning paper. Yes, that's a good distinction. Like ship them.
And even business cards are sketchy, but people are still using them at some point, I guess. I mean, this pandemic might actually kill the business card. I've been saying that it was going to go away for a while.
I'm like, who?
So I don't know. That's interesting. I haven't thought of it.
On LinkedIn.
I haven't given one out maybe all year. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought about that at all. But now it's like literally passing something from my germy hand to yours. After we're vaccinated, maybe it won't feel so germy. But COVID-19 is not the only germ out there. So anyway, just very interesting. Sorry, that's not really related to HR per se, but I do agree with you that sending stuff in the mail is odd, and unless it is the premium type gifts, otherwise when you send a huge thick brochure and a packet of paper and things, it does maybe scare people that are expecting a more digital experience. It makes them wonder about the entity a little. So I think those things need to be thought through.
Well, and it can be a cost savings and a time savings not to have to package and print and have it be, all of that. I can have like you said, a fillable PDF, and I can have other, ways to communicate that. And,
For sure.
Like I said, a portal or a web page dedicated to it, an app. Let's, be cool and be an app. So, we can have a firm app. So anyway, just what else are you digitizing? So those are just the things that we've been talking to firms about, as you're planning for 2021. And thinking about, what do we need to do to make sure we're trying to anticipate as much as possible some kind of blended environment, and some of the things to incorporate in our budget and educate probably our partners on to figure that out too. How do we facilitate that, and what are the needs for each of our departments and service lines? And then coordinate with IT, because a big piece of it, I think, is IT. So those are just some of the things that we've been seeing. Anything you'd add?
I was just thinking of all the things I'd add. So, we don't have time for them. But I guess the only thing to consider also is any sort of fees that we might have to pay to fractional staffing or any sort of temps that we may need to get us through spring busy season if we did experience turnover, if we do feel that we're under capacity. So part of budgeting is budgeting capacity.
Yes.
And we could have a whole nother topic on budgeting capacity. And that would be something else to really think about, because if you are going to have to do staff augmentation, and I think many firms are, you want to have that in the budget to pay the agencies that are going to give you that augmented staff, plus probably a higher rate per hour for those folks. You might call them temps, but these days they call them fractional workers. And I think a lot of firms are going to be looking for them out there in the marketplace. So,
well, and outsourcing, or just all kinds of ways, temp workers, whatever it might be. But like you said, projects, engagements, and do the capacity planning with your department heads. I think that's one of the things HR can offer to the department heads, to the service line leaders. I was and this was a smaller firm, but I was like, have we mapped out your clients that are, and you're anticipating returning? What were the hours last year? Not what we sold it for. What were the hours last year? And then how are we going to be able to budget, FTE? And they are going to do some fractional. They have, one person for sure. And I'm like, is that enough? And they have a new person starting, and they have somebody reducing at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you can do that by service line, by group, and a lot, I think that's something HR could offer to provide that service and help them figure that out. And then offer these options, like you're talking about, Jen. And I know we've talked about, alternative staffing ideas in a previous, session, Monday HR huddle, but that's something I think to keep in front of people. I know some people feel hopeless. Like, I don't know already. It's, December. I don't know how we're going to get through the busy season. And that could be partners, that could be managers. They're just feeling really squeezed. And if you can help them see there's options out there, for how we reallocate the work or assign work differently, I think that would be helpful.
And if you see this video and you want more information about specifics, like who are they calling for this kind of help, then just come, hit us up in social media, direct message us, or email us, and we'll definitely get you some ideas.
For sure.
The last thing you want is to go into busy season, with sort of a scared, let's put our flak helmets on and, pray that we survive it. That's not going to be good for our profession if we approach busy season that way, because young people aren't going to keep showing up for busy seasons like that. They're not going to want to be part of this if we don't figure these things out. And we can't figure them out. So anyway, sorry. I know that was a little far afield, but it's part of the budget if we're going to pay, increased fees or fees to the agency. So.
Absolutely. Well, we plan on seeing you next week, and we'll have December 21st be our last HR huddle for 2020. But we'll plan to see you next week. And in the meantime, we hope you have a great, productive week. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Bye now.